Okay, so we're going to talk about glazing. This is a much asked topic and it's a completely misunderstood topic, I think, as well, it's safe to say. So glazing is now something that we teach in classes, pretty much every class that we do, because it's such a useful way to fix things that have gone wrong. So what we have, which hopefully people can empathise with, is a model which I'm tempted to abandon, but I feel has potential. And what we're going to do is we're going to use glazing over the fairly rough work that we've got here to enhance him, work with what we've got, and ultimately to save time while achieving a pretty good result. The first thing to get into your head about glazing is that the moment you understand how to start it and you've got a decent idea of the process, it becomes not scary. I think the fear that people have of it in the beginning is they'll do it wrong and they'll delete stuff. And there's a very, very simple rule you can follow to make sure that you don't delete the work underneath your glazes, and it's one that we should all be really willing to do. And that is the concept of doing a test. So I've put my blue here. I've then added a lot of water to it. I'm not going to give you a ratio because that would pretty much be useless. I will, however, hazard a guess that it is a ratio between 1 part paint to either 15 to 50 parts water. It's very, very diluted, and I've taken a lot off the brush as well. So that's our test. Now it's pretty obvious that that's going to do basically nothing on the model unless it's going over a white part. So we're going to add a little bit more than that. If I wasn't talking, that test would have taken me seconds. We add a little bit more. This is stronger. Now, a couple of things. The closer your glaze is to the color it's going over, the less worried you need to be about it being super, super soft, as in like having loads of water to very little paint. And the more different it is, let's say I was doing white over light gray, the white is still going to be very, very different, so I need to be more careful. In fact, what we're going to do here is I'm going to go over an area that's a pretty similar color to our Cantor. So if I wanted to tint all of this and bring it back to a more bluey color, like our base coat color, I could just YOLO it all over there. I did my test. It's a similar color to the color that it's going over. I can start where it's the most different color and end elsewhere. I can even quickly wash out my brush or give it a lick, and I can mop stuff up off that area if I don't want it to cover it. Now, why would you do the scary glazing? So this is the glazing where, let's say we're going to go over one of these white sections. Like our model shouldn't be white, he's meant to be blue. And this is where you do it and why you do it. Now you cannot add lightness to your model unless you're using white or a paint that contains white. And there's a problem with that, and that is that it gets rid of the vibrant colors. We absolutely don't want to get rid of the vibrant colors. We want this to be a punchy blue. We're aiming for something a little bit more like this. So with this glaze here, I'm using a big brush, by the way. This is a size 3. It's still got a great point on it. You do not want an old crappy brush for this. Something that's seen better days. Right, so popped one layer over. Now, if we get it right, you can use a hairdryer, or you can just blow on it, or you can wait. A really good indication is that you can see your paint drying. The drier and hotter your climate, the faster this will happen. So actually there is a bonus for you poor Australians, Spanish people, everyone else living somewhere really, really hot and trying to do painting. Might be bad for blending. It's amazing for glazing. It's the first week of January in the UK, so it's not warm. Anyway, let's do this a few times faster. May as well catch a couple of other points on the model while waiting for the other one to dry, ending my strokes where it's darker. Over the white, this is now going to filter it. Think of an Instagram filter or something like that. We're dropping a transparent mask over it, and that's going to completely change the personality of it. The thing to be wary of is just not doing it too thick. The test is so important. What you'll find is, because I'm using a big brush, and because I don't need to put on much each layer, you don't really need to go back to the palette for more paint often, and the bigger the brush, the longer you can last using the glazes. There is a kind of fine line. I would not want to be using a 4. That's like 100% more volume than this. It would just, it'd run the risk of flooding it, and it'd be harder. And of course, this is slower than putting down an opaque layer of exactly the right color in exactly the right place, but it's a little bit more forgiving, and it does have some properties that or some results you just can't get from other techniques, basically. So with each step, we're bringing this closer towards a color that we're happy with, and the model is becoming more blue and less white. Because we're not adding physical thickness to the model, you can do this as many times as you want. I mean, there's going to be some limit, which is probably going to be your boredom, but we're not adding thick layers of paint here, so it's extremely forgiving in that sense too. It's not a glaze if it's adding thick layers of paint. Just as a note, you can glaze with Citadel shade paints and contrast paints, but they will add layers, especially the shade paints. They're a bit thick physically when they dry. So probably I could have been a bit braver and my mix could have been more strong, more paint in it, but that's just something you'll figure out as you go. I'm now going to whisk around the model and you'll see what happens when I use this colour all over those white sections. So much easier, not on camera. I've made a braver mix and you'll see how much more efficient it is when you get that level right. This is going to slightly obscure what's under it, but not fully. And now what I can do is I can scoot around this model at lightning speed, making a noticeable difference each time, but not too much of a difference, and still benefiting from whatever was underneath, which is that very light, almost white blue. That may look white, but it's actually blue horror. Used to be an edge paint, now it's just a layer paint. This is one glaze. When you get it right, it is utterly magic. Look at the difference we're making here. I don't know if it's possible to do it before and after, Ian. Now, what if you do go too thick with your glaze? Well, whatever was underneath it, you just put there and you do it again. Let's get some proper control, get the holder out. This will help me work faster. It's just about getting the angle. I'd assess your decisions on this stuff from an arm's length away as well. Put your head back and your arm forwards as far as you can get the model away from you. Whether it looks right there is probably more important than whether it looks right 1 inch from your nose. That's not really what matters when you're talking about a squad or army painting at all, actually. Again, big, decent sized brush, so we just went and went and went until the paint stopped coming. Because you're effectively doing a practice, each step you're going to repeat multiple times. What you'll find as well is you get a bit more confident with what you're doing. So it might be that you start with glazing and by the end you're like, well, actually I could step this up a notch. I know where I want to go and I can paint. I've been glazing this much. I can highlight this much. You make a more opaque mix, less dilution, or brighter, or has a different color in it, you know, whichever. Still don't want to flood it, obviously. More important to set up bigger brushes right than it is with the smaller ones, I think. There we go, so you can be a bit more brave. Do something like this. Starting playing with dilution will absolutely, you know, multiply your skill as a painter. Just thinking about this stuff sometimes, or being aware of the considerations that come with it, it's really going to make a big difference. And knowing that you have this in your back pocket to fix any mistakes, way too thick there, is really, really good. Small note on airbrushing, you can absolutely airbrush glazes, but if you make a mistake like I made there, you know, you can't just mop it off with a licked brush or a wet brush or something like that. So do really make sure that you check your glazes on your hand and somewhere less important on the model before you kind of whack it all over an area. That's glazing. Any questions you have, let me know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to now do some rough stippling underneath because we can hide how rough my work is with the glazes, and we're going to get this model to looking hopefully as impactful as possible, as fast as possible, like this guy and like this guy. So hopefully this is going to show the power of combining the technique with other stuff, because I think really that that's the strength of it. And there's this assumption, which I had as well early on, that you're going to start your model with glazing, you're going to finish it with glazing. And obviously that's something that would probably take a very, very long time. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine it with other techniques. Now stippling down a glaze, which basically means my paint is quite soft and diluted. The only downside of this is that in comparison to normal dry brushing, I'm going to be kind of deleting any panel lines because normal dry brushing would leave them. So I might just have to put a quick wash next to his kind of shoulder trim or stuff like that. More bravery needed. Maybe also a smaller brush. I just need to be dabbing on smaller circles once I've started this at least. Yeah, I should have swapped brushes earlier, never mind. See how the smaller brush is basically giving me because we're doing circles, because they're round brushes, essentially now we can stipple inside our stipples and it's not too tricky. Whether you're stippling a line or you want to make a, you know, like a circle like I have on his knee, you can fit within those. And also I could have used this brush, I think, sooner and just been a little bit more brave with it. But as I've mentioned several times in this tutorial, it's quite nice to use a technique when you get a practice go. We're not using irreversibly thick paint or strong paint or anything like that, so we can give it a little go, and then when we are feeling more confident, then we can do something a bit more brave, rather than just YOLOing in initially, which is probably much better if anything. We don't want to ruin it. Even though I'm putting down diluted paint, it's only in the very tip of my brush. So I'm being careful when I take the paint, just to keep it at the very, very end of the bristles, top few millimeters. Okay, so something like that. Now glazing comes in. You can use whatever brush size you feel comfortable for this, but because we're going within a rougher stipple, it should feel a bit less scary. And again, we're just going in the middle of the sections that we've already done. And maybe we don't even have to glaze. We could be really bold and say we want this bit to be really bright. We want this bit to be really bright. And what glazing allows us to do is we can then fade into more confident work just on the edges. So you don't have to glaze all of it. You can just use the glazing to soften up the edges. The other thing you can do is you can hide this with edge highlighting. What I mean by that is, maybe there's a little bit too much on my brush there. Okay, so we've got a quick glaze, a blocky highlight, and then 2 lines. The time that they took was not that much at all. Do the same on the shoulder pad trim. Always harder on the inside bit, but we managed. This trim too. Careful to brace. I'm using a holder, which makes it easier. Just want to be steady, and then side of your brush, especially on your sharp edges. These ones are notoriously hard, by the way, on the backpack. They're not as sharp, but especially on sharp edges. If you take your time and you've got a brush with very little paint on it, you can kind of scrape the paint off the side of the bristles, and you're more likely to get a really thin line if that's what you're after. And again, you can put a more confident bit in the middle. You can do this fast, you can do it slower, you know, whatever fits with the method of painting that you're using at any given time. Okay, so you can do stuff like that. If your edge highlights go wrong, you've either had too much paint on your brush like I did there, or you're not trying to get them from the right angle. If it's a sharp 90-degree edge, or ish close to 90 degrees like this one, just tilt and turn, or put it upside down, turn it until the point where you can get things to go the best for you. Like, help yourself out. It's a control technique, so don't make it harder to do it with control. So hopefully we can see the potential of that now. Tip for any of you Space Marine painters out there, if you're not doing edge highlight everything, like heavy metal style, there's a couple of areas on the chest that are just always missed. And it's normally going to be by the top tips of the Aquila. So this bit would be bright normally under most lighting circumstances. And if you go over the Aquila, you can just put a wash over that when you've painted it, and it'll perfectly sort this out for you. So I went a bit slower there because I was trying to explain what I was doing, but actually that's probably 5 minutes work. I would argue, apart from getting a base coat right, it's the most impactful 5 minutes of work that you can put into your model, because these are the bits that will sell it. I always describe this as like, if you've wrapped up a present, you know, the wrapping paper's all good, it's all steady, that's your base coat and your pre-work, then you put a bow around it. So what comes next? Take my highlight color. Now, because this is going to be super thin, you can put a bit of another color in if you want, even if it's a dark one, without particularly worrying. This is going to filter over the top of the basically white that we've got. This is how thin it is, how dilute rather. A bit too much on the brush, so we'll just get rid of loads of that. Probably got rid of too much, but for the multiple of time, that's much better than too little. And we'll start whisking over all those areas. Now you might want to leave some areas pretty much white. So you can do that with a finger, you can do it however you want. This is a nice way to, if you put down some brave little highlights like that one on his toe, it's a nice way to pull them back. You know, put that down when the color, it's a bit too light. I just pop this over the top. As you gain in confidence with either your placement or your dilution, you can modify them. And because we've not added too much We've had a fair few goes at this, but because we've not added too much texture or paint in doing so, you can also jump back and do the stages that were underneath again if we wanted. That'd be absolutely fine. I'm always trying to push towards a more similar color to the one that I'm using. So I'm trying to push towards the shadows to this, hide my lift off point, which is this bit, that dot. Hopefully Ian demonstrated that nicely. Yeah. I've done this all over a piece, but I recommend if you're trying it out yourself for the first time, just try it on a small aspect of something. Maybe you've got like a bauble or a shoulder piece or a little metallic element you want to put some washes down on. We've done it with lighter colors before, we're doing it with darker colors now. You can do it with whatever you want. Make sure not to miss anywhere because it'll really stand out. So I definitely could have been a bit more brave and done a few less steps, but particularly while you're trying to learn a technique, it's really nice that there is a safe way to do this one. So I'd recommend that's how you try it. Once you're confident, you can try it with slightly less dilute paint until you pretty much get away from glazing and you're just doing slightly more heavily diluted layering. This is why it'll teach you so much about dilution. It's encouraging you to play with how wet your paint is, basically. Okay, good. Still some more to go, but you get the idea. Just as a final step, if you are looking to kind of like leave a section, like I want to leave the middle of this one, just start next to it and push away from it. Always think about where your stroke's going to end and it'll really kind of add up over the course of a paint job. Nothing wrong with fingers either. Okay, so I actually did a very thin Cantor blue all over because that's a really important part of the color. And what we're going to do now is absolutely cheating, and that's to get that proper shiny armor look. 2 parts matte to 3 parts satin, and thin coat that all over, and the armor should look pretty shiny. This is done now because it'll help the metallics look shiny too. I'm just going to give them a quick wash of Reichland, and yeah. Final highlight beforehand, and amazing tip here. I'm going to be dabbing, I'm not going to be doing a line. This will make it look like it's maybe seen some battle action, and it is so much more forgiving. Cannot overstate this. Try and keep my scrapes or the dabbing to, like, you know, knuckles, front facing bits, around toes, stuff like that. Okay, so I wanted to do a quick run around of my models. You can spend as little or as long with this technique as you like, and how long you spend, especially on an army level, it's not necessary to spend hours to get an incredible result out of using glazing or to get the most out of it. So roughly these models took, for the blue section at least, this guy took the longest. He literally took like 3 hours. I tried to get him really smooth. I enjoyed it. So it wasn't a waste of time, and I think I improved at the technique, and that was really good. And I'm pleased with him, and he looks like Jason Statham because he's angry, so I'm very pleased with that. But he took around 3 hours. Now the Terminator is much larger. He's rougher. I don't think he looks any worse on the tabletop, and he's about 1.5 to 2.5 hours, I would say. This guy, I tried to go really fast on him, and I got him to like a not great stage in like 20 minutes. This is where the tutorial picked up. You saw that, and then we spent a bit longer on him, so I don't quite know where he was. He's probably around 2 hours. I think he was very effective because he's got some really bright sections on him, and they work, especially with the gold in there, works really well. Now the guy at the back, he was by far the fastest. I don't mean by a small margin here. This model, I used a sand timer and I turned it twice and then took 5 more minutes. So his blue took 35 minutes. He is banging for the tabletop. Really, really good. High impact. I didn't need to spend as long painting his feet, so I reckon I could have got my 30 minutes in. The top of the backpack is the weak part. But he's got some nice sections. You know, I did the bits at the back here that look really 3-dimensional, even put a little bit of time into the back bits. So if there's anywhere to be improved, then it would be the backpack, but I could have not painted his feet. I painted them okay, and they're going to get pigmented anyway, so absolute waste of time in my opinion. 30 minutes for really high impact armor with some transfers on. These guys would look amazing. 20 of these in an army, they would be absolutely brilliant. So please let me know what you think, which one is your favorite and why. And let me know if there's maybe something that we could add to this tutorial to help you out. Another technique that we could cover. We could cover glazing more if you'd like in bigger applications or smaller applications. Or maybe you want to see exactly how I did all of these ultramarines, or you want me to distill an ultramarines method for you. That is on the way. That's why we've done so many. And all of them are going to be done with kind of speed in mind and getting a fantastic result in mind.